It's Solving Your Driver Problem, where we bring guests who've got proven strategies that just plain work for driver recruiting, compliance, training, and retention. Today we have Eric Waldinger. He is the Chief Marketing Officer at Samba Safety. Why we partnered with Samba was pretty simple. Samba says Samba's all mission is to save lives. We're out here making the road a safer place. That seemed like good enough reason to get together from our standpoint. So we come at it from different angles. And that's what we want to break down today, is talking about risk mitigation, and how Samba goes about that. And so, Eric, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Scott, thanks for having me. I'm excited to join your podcast today.
So why don't we start with just the ABCs of driver monitoring? What is it?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. When I first joined Samba Safety, a lot of time I was spending on trying to understand, okay, what are the basics of monitoring and what does it mean? And when I break it down, I put it in very simple terms. If you were able to pull a motor vehicle record every single day on your driver to understand, do they have a valid driver's license? Do they have any infractions? Do they have any violations, major or minor, or crashes? Would you do that? And I think the overwhelming answer to that question to everyone I spoke to was yes. The biggest issue, however, is that is extremely cost prohibitive. If you spent on average $10 a day per employee, per driver to pull a motor vehicle record, it would cost you millions and millions of dollars. What driver monitoring does is takes the need to pull your MVR every single day out of the equation. We have a very comprehensive technology that essentially, if you sign up for the driver monitoring program, it looks for changes in your motor vehicle record. So if a violation occurs, you get an alert, it'll automatically pull the MVR. If you have a suspended license, it will give you an alert and give you the MVR. And getting all of that data pulled in together allows you to get a full 360 view of your driver. So you can start training, monitoring, and more importantly, coaching driver behavior based off their trends. And so, in essence, what it does is just keeps you safe and allows you to truly understand the status of every single driver on your platform.
So the way I understand it is there's a gap in time that a driver may report if they choose to report what's going on, because they may be dusting off the resume after an incident. Is that the real why of reducing that time gap, or is what you described there is more to it because of the analytics? How did it evolve, or where did it start?
So that's a great question. We talk a lot about the visibility gap, and the visibility gap is the time in which a traditional model works. So in most organizations, if you're federally regulated, you have a mandate that you have to pull a motor vehicle record once a year.
Right.
The time traditional organizations had to understand that gap were huge. Once a year, if I had a clean driving record on January 1st, but I got a DUI on January 2nd, many organizations would not know till the following year that happened. It would be up to me to self-report. Additionally, all those small micro changes actually fundamentally changed risk. So on its face, understanding what happened with my driving record, what happened with me is the core, but it's all the analytics, it's all the training that comes on top of it. So, again, using the scenario of the visibility gap. So previously, I may have been blind for 364 days after one of my employees had a DUI. Now, if you think about the downstream ramifications to that, if you have an accident, if I get in an accident and I have a suspended license, it's from a litigation and a legal standpoint, it is up to the organization. They're required to know that I, as Eric Waldinger, had a bad driving record or had a suspended license. Well, now if I get into a crash, now all of a sudden the liability is exponentially higher. And God forbid I get into an accident or a crash where there is a bodily injury, Now, all of a sudden, we're looking at litigation, we're looking at lawsuits, we're looking at, the nuclear verdicts that everybody's afraid of. What we do is we give you the base to understand, here's your data, I'm monitoring my drivers, and it starts forming your safety policy. The second thing is, when you have driver monitoring, you configure it to your own safety policy. So we understand that a private fleet may have different regulations than an over the road. And so, depending on the types of drivers and the types of organizations, you can change and adapt your monitoring to fit your safety policies to make sure, one, you're in compliance, and two, making sure that you don't have any, exposure in litigation.
So you touched on a nuclear verdict, which we did a presentation on earlier this year with some friends across the industry, High Right, Benish Law, some insurance company, National Interstate. And the whole concept there was the driver shouldn't have been there in the first place. That's how a lot of these extra zeros get added in the courtroom. And, simple stories are a driver's pulled over, doing everything right, flashers on, cones out, truck's broken down, someone comes flying around the corner. Could even be, in some of these stories are as bad as the driver's intoxicated, but that MVR wasn't pulled properly. There was a suspension on the license because of child support. Somebody didn't know that. And the claim in the courtroom is, well, that driver shouldn't have been there in the first place. This company's proving negligence. And so that was a theme of risk reduction that Samba helps prevent. Am I correct?
That is correct.
So there's a lot of you guys are pulling a lot of data. And in the safety department, they're getting pings and dings from every, cameras, ELDs, etc. So they're getting a lot of notifications in there. I know Samba's got a scoring system, and you were alluding to that of how you would tailor that for each organization. Can you walk us through what that looks like and really how does a safety director help prioritize what action to take?
Yeah. So Scott, let me actually, I'm going to take the punitive side second. I'm going to answer the question a little differently. Because I think one of the advantages that we get with driver monitoring is, one, you get the Hawthorne effect, meaning that if someone knows they're being monitored, you're going to see a reduction in 14% of crashes. You're going to see a 22% reduction in violations. But more importantly, there's the human element. And so one thing we know as an industry is our drivers are the most important piece of our equation. They are the lifeblood, the heart and soul of keeping our businesses running. Because of that, there's a driver shortage. Like, finding qualified drivers is really, really hard. And I know I'm probably preaching to the choir on this podcast, but the first thing I look at from the monitoring of your driver population is the coaching. And I think it's an overlooked benefit of monitoring. I have a really, this was a story when I first started. I was talking to a carrier who was out of Texas, and they implemented driver monitoring, and they had a gentleman who always had just an impeccable driving record. And all of a sudden, they're starting to see minor violations. There was a speeding. There was a failure to obey, which isn't as minor. But they saw, a few different incidents that hit at the same time. At the same time, they got the alert that there was a suspended license. And many organizations that we work with, I think, would have taken the approach of sitting the driver down, writing them up, making sure that, pulling them off the road. But what this organization did was say, okay, something's going on. You went from one of our best, our best drivers ever to you're our worst driver in our fleet. What's going on? And through this conversation, what they found out is, unfortunately, his wife had cancer. He was a proud man, didn't want to talk about any of it, but they sat him down, started talking through the problems, and found out that there was really something big going on in his life. Well, they instantly took action, and the action they took is not suspending him, they said, we're going to give you the next 4 weeks off with full pay. We want you to go take care of your wife. We want to make sure you get through everything that you need to. And now all of a sudden, this is absolutely their best driver. He's won the safety award 4 years in a row. He's also now their #1 recruiter. And they use driver monitoring not as punitive in this case. They used it for how do I help guide you and make life better? Now, on the scoring side, they were also able to do this because what you're able to do on the scoring methodology is understand that everybody's got a different level of risk that they're willing to take or not willing to take. And so from scoring, you can say 5 mile, 15 miles an hour over a speed limit is X number of points on my scoring system. 5, miles an hour is Y number of points. Failure to obey is a knockout. And so from a scoring standpoint, based off of what your safety policy and you want your safety policy to be, you can create it and change your scoring so that you can be more aggressive. So if you want drivers to understand, before you hit the threshold, that kind of red, yellow, green, before you hit yellow or red, we're actually going to say 1 violation means you're going to yellow, which means you're going to go into training, which means you're going to go into some type of remediation of those issues. If you're continually monitoring and continually scoring, you're going to actually see natural fluctuations. The truth is, you're never going to find the perfect driver. We're human. People are going to make mistakes. They're going to be, speeding accidentally, even if they look down and they don't realize the road changes from 35 to 30 miles an hour. Life happens, but can you actually get people to be more aware? And can you use your scoring system to help guide the way in which you use training and effectiveness in your organizations?
So I really like that story about that driver in Texas. I think we both sat in enough safety directors' offices. I've heard this phrase a lot, and it always stuck with me of, he was a good driver, but we had to let him go. And because he had crossed some threshold, right? We've defined our lines. Here's our safety policy. When somebody does these things, we gone.
Yep.
And to your point, there could be drivers of the year. And I wonder how many times there were pink flags. And I heard that term once, pink flags, because you're calling them out before they become red flags, and you have to let them go. How many times were those pink flags missed? And to your point, didn't have the conversation to figure out what's going on. And we talk about in our instructor driver certification program, LLC, that there's distracted driving, which, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of this in driving going on with phones on the road. That's real. The other piece of distracted driving is where your brain is at, where your mind is at. And it's why, hey, I'm hands-free talking on the phone, but if I'm talking to my wife who's going through cancer treatment, well, that's a pretty heavy conversation. I would suggest that would be a distracted conversation versus I need to pick up milk when I get home, from the store. So the point there is it allows you to identify some of the pink flags before they become red, before you have to say, let them go, and has those coaching opportunities. And I'm sure you're seeing that too with not only with monitoring, but I assume it's a wine and cheese pairing along with camera systems out there, right? Of these triggers that are catching events, and you can catch them before they become a problem.
Yeah. So no, I think, when you look at all the different data points that can come in, you've got your motor vehicle record, but in order for something to hit an MVR, you have to either be pulled over, you have to get a citation.
Too late, right?
You've got camera, but that camera data, between camera and, a lot of the technology out there, you're getting so many different pieces of data, whether it's your, a hard acceleration, a hard brake, did someone look at their phone? Were they drinking coffee? All of those data points become extremely important, but they're also, for a safety director, they're overwhelming, because what are the things you need to look at? Telematics has their ABCs, their acceleration, their braking, and their cornering. Cameras have, depending on which camera you have a bunch of different other functions. So having all this data coming at you, safety and risk professionals are not quants by nature. I mean, none of us are. What we do know how to do is find the right people, make sure our trucks are safe, make sure we have all these pieces in, but we don't have, and I don't mean to call them kids, but the whole new aspect of data analytics is so foreign that, from a trucking standpoint, I think we've adopted it pretty quickly. But how do you just create a very seamless area for someone to understand the data? And then what do you do with it?
Agreed. So, I think I went back to a question a couple minutes ago on the scoring system, whether it's Samba, whether it's telematics, whether it's cameras, those have got to be all in line so there's not noise. And then part of the reason why we build out instructors and trainers is there's only one safety director, and he or she can't be everywhere. So you need to have mouthpieces out there, right? The leaders, the team leaders. You've got a coach on a basketball team and you've got the captain. And on football, you got offense and defense. And that's kind of the point. Who are those voices of the coaches when the coach isn't there at all times? And so that is the plan. So we're all speaking the same language, and we can control those pink flags before they become red.
Yeah. And I know we don't, I know we're not going to make this an hour-long podcast, but I think as you look through it, there's a couple things that the partnership between Samba Safety and Avatar, I think, is really exciting to me. It's about workflow. So if you think about our customers and the safety professionals' day-to-day job, there's so many things that are outside of it now. You've got DQ file management, you've got training, you've got driver monitoring, you've got everything else coming at you, inventory. And so one of the things that I get excited about is how we can automate the data. And I know we're going to talk in a few minutes around DQ file management, but if I just kind of jump into that, what I love is, the old school files like I remember going into, I almost said the name of a company. One of a customer from my past, where literally it was just file of DQ file management. And I'm thinking, holy moly, there's got to be a better way. I didn't actually say holy moly at the time, but this is a family-friendly podcast. Knowing that there's all these data points, you got to have the original MVR in place. You need to understand if there's violations that occur. Having driver monitoring integrated with your DQ file management system takes that administrative burden off of you. And at the end of the day, we're in the business of making your lives as a safety or risk professional easier. So, depending on what organization, if you're doing driver monitoring, in many cases, you don't have to pull that MVR every single year because you're getting monitored and it's already in the system. It just saves so much time and administrative burden. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is make sure we keep you safe, we keep everyone alive, we make the process easier, and we make roads safer. And the easiest way to do that is to get you the data in a way that makes your life easier to digest it. And that's why I'm excited about, Avatar and Samba Safety coming together through this partnership.
I hear you. And to the point when we hear, well, I don't have enough time to roll around this data or analyze it or have those coaching conversations. And then, but you look at, but your DQ files are paper. Here's 20 hours back in a week. Can you do it now?
Exactly.
I mean, I had a customer ask me yesterday can we reformat this form so it can be easier when I print it? I was like, why are we doing this? Why are we printing it? We don't need to.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get audited these days, they're starting remote primarily. So you're uploading a document into a portal. So there never needs to, it can start digital and it can stay digital. And to your point, you give hours back in the day. Now you can actually go be a risk manager and not just an administrative assistant.
Which is awesome. Because you don't have to worry about, am I complying to the 3-year original motor vehicle record in my file? It's just done for you. And it's exciting to watch the transformation in this industry and moving towards some of the digitalization.
So you touched on, I just want to have one last ABC question about driver monitoring. And I ask because we had this question the other day when we were doing an audit for a client. They were actually using Samba for monitoring and weren't running MVRs. And so we have monitoring in place. And my understanding, Eric, is that it really is dependent on the state of which you reside or which the driver resides. Do you mind just giving us the quick scoop there?
Yeah. So based off the FMCSA gives you obviously the requirement of you need to pull the motor vehicle record once a year. So from an overreaching standpoint, for CSA monitoring, you have to have an MVR on record. Now, each state has some different regulations where, California, you have to pull an MVR every single year, even if you're monitoring. Whereas, I think Texas or New York, you don't have to. So each state has a different set of rules, but best practice, I'd say, 38 out of the 50 states will allow monitoring to just be that baseline. And as long as you're continually monitoring, you don't have to pull that motor vehicle record because you're already in compliance by doing it through the MVR. It will automatically pull that for you if something happens. So we know it's clean and there's no reason to say, pull the information. Also, when you look at the motor vehicle record, again, it's looking for suspended license. It's looking for revocation. It's running through your license status. So you have that cleared the entire way.
Cool. Well, let's get out with this. I asked this question to everybody that joins the podcast, and it wasn't on your prepared list. So you ready to dance?
I'm ready.
What accomplishment are you most proud of in your career and why?
It's a great question. I think for me personally, it's just the people that we work with. Like I am most proud, at least at Samba Safety, of knowing that when we put in driver monitoring and we have our systems in place with our customers, we save lives. And we redo that because we reduce accidents 14%, we reduce violations 23%, but more importantly, we're impacting the lives of our drivers and our customers. And I love to get out there and see the impact it has. The story that I told you about the gentleman with his wife, that's the stuff that gets me up at night. Like that's the stuff that makes me excited to continue working, knowing that we can really truly impact people on a day-to-day basis.
I agree. You need those stories. Some of the hardest part about being in safety is celebrating the accident that didn't happen last Tuesday because it didn't happen.
Exactly.
So some of it is looking at the numbers, and I would agree. That is the point of people being able to make a living, coming home safely and be a part of their family. So Eric, we're excited about doing that together. We appreciate you coming on today. And without further ado, we'll call it a wrap.
Thank you so much.
So everyone, thanks for listening to another edition of Solving Your Driver Problem. We'll be back with a new episode shortly. Thank you all.